Welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast, where today's thought leaders discuss how they're using the latest social media strategies and technologies in marketing, sales, customer service, and HR. Get ready to be inspired as our guests contribute to your digital transformation through their stories, knowledge, and insights into what works in today's digitally connected world. And now, here's Bernie Borges, your host of the Social Business Engine podcast.
Hey there, welcome to episode 208. This is Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso and host of the Social Business Engine podcast. Hey, thanks for listening. My guest on this episode is Tammy Boyd, Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at NeuroInternational. Now, Tammy shares a story that is all too familiar to some other marketing professionals. You see, her employer, NeuroInternational, whom she introduces in the opening of our conversation, has not embraced digital marketing as a strategy. So Tammy has built her personal brand within the industry of her employer, and her brand has become so strong that she's become the face of her brand. And her brand is elevating not just the company that she's employed by, but also the entire industry that she works in. Truly, Tammy's is a story that's very inspirational to anyone. Now, before we transition to my conversation with Tammy Boyd, I want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by SAP. Social Business Journal Volume 11 is a case study in savvy social selling the SAP way. The case study is available for download without a form to fill out. That means it's ungated. You just click on the big button to open the PDF in your browser, and that is located at vengreso.com/SAP. And of course, we link that up in our show notes page at vengreso.com/podcasts. All right, now let's get to my conversation with Tammy Boyd, Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at NeuroInternational. Tammy, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Bernie, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this conversation and sharing it with my listener. Let's begin, Tammy, with an introduction to your company, NeuroInternational, and your role at the company.
Sure. So NeuroInternational is a postacute provider for individuals that have a brain or spinal cord injury or that have a neurological diagnosis. And my role in the organization is the Vice President of Business Development and Marketing.
That's a big role.
Right.
Vice President, Business Development and Marketing. Okay. So the reason that I suggested that we do this podcast, Tammy, is because what you've been experiencing is kind of interesting. And I want to share that with my audience. And that is that you work for a company where a digital strategy has not exactly been embraced. So consequently, what you have done and done quite well, I might say,
Thank you.
Build your personal brand, and then essentially through the halo effect of your personal brand, having it reflect really well on NeuroInternational. So let's talk about that. How did you go about developing this strategy of you building your personal brand for Tammy Boyd and it having a positive impact on NeuroInternational, the company you work for?
Sure. So to start off with, I'm a really competitive person. So I'm always looking at where aren't my competitors? Where can I be successful where maybe others aren't looking for opportunity? So I took that approach, and then I also attend a lot of events around the country and I network extensively. And as I was learning this is where I saw that digital marketing and social media was pretty much where the future is going with marketing. And I saw this as a huge opportunity. And I also know that from my organization's perspective, that they haven't fully embraced social media. They feel like, maybe there's some competitive advantage I might give away by announcing certain things. So I'm really very cautious in what I say and I deliver out there. So I felt like having the role of business development and marketing, that had to be my strategy. I felt I would be failing if I didn't move forward with that, even though I didn't get the solid buy-in from my organization. It's like not that they discouraged it, but I just have a lot of different roles.
Okay. So one thing that I know from our conversation in preparation for this podcast is that you building your personal brand, Tammy, has had a positive impact on your company. So let's talk about that journey. How has that been evolving for you? Once you realized that it was really up to you to build your personal brand, how did you actually do it in a way that would have a positive impact on NeuroInternational?
Right. I sought out decision makers and influencers I mostly work in the workers' compensation industry space. It's who I target for business. So I targeted who the influencers are, who are the key decision makers, what is their pain points, what is keeping them up at night, how can I add value? So I've always been professional. I listen a lot. I've learned about how that they've become successful. How can I attach my brand to show that I add value, that I'm credible, that I have integrity, and that our organization is up and rising, and how can we be seen as a leader within the industry? And so being on a national platform has really catapulted my value of my personal brand, and always having the accessibility and consistency in the branding too. And I've done this more frequently, being consistent in social media of constant posts, but they're valuable posts. It's not like a, hey, look at me kind of post, but something that adds value of why did I attend an event? What did I gain from this event that I might share with others so that they have that knowledge sharing as well?
Okay. Now, in terms of your journey, I remember in our conversation to prepare for this podcast, you told me about an aha moment. And I think that's really worth sharing on the podcast. So if you would, what was that aha moment for you?
Sure. So it's about 3 years ago. I was attending a national event. And a lot of times when I go to these events, I'm usually an exhibitor and not an attendee. So I was in the exhibit hall looking around, seeing what kind of connections I could make, who I could network with, how could I possibly build my business and my brand there. And I noticed there was a huge flat screen monitor that was tracking influencers at this national event, and it was through Twitter. So I had just barely started getting the hang of doing Twitter, and I'm like, well, this is something I know that I can participate in and add value. And so in doing so, I became the top 20 influencers at this national event attended by 8,000 people. And so I thought, that was where my aha moment was, that there's all this real estate that there's really no barrier to access in doing it. There is a little bit of a learning curve. So I began doing that social media platform and gained recognition, and I got positive feedback. And so I was reinforced in that way that I felt like, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm not sure that I'm doing the right thing, and I was fumbling through it. And so since then, I've taken courses, I've done workshops. So I really feel like, okay, I've honed in my skill set of what's best practices in social media. So that's kind of where my aha moment came, was like, there's not a lot of these organizations that are spending thousands and thousands of dollars at these events, but really untapped resource here for social media of really getting their message out. So I felt that was really valuable, and it's definitely has escalated my personal brand and even my organization's brand as being a thought leader within the workers' compensation industry. So I'm really proud of really honing in on that and understanding that, and maybe being a little bit ahead of the curve than most of the other organizations within the industry as far as it goes to social media.
At that event, when you had that experience, I can only imagine that aha moment that you described. What was the reaction back at the office? What did your colleagues, your bosses, what did they say? You got that recognition and you were kind of sharing that aha moment.
Right. My direct supervisor, he's the founder and president of the organization. He was ecstatic. I was telling him, like, did you know that I'm the first time attending this event and I'm seen as the top 20 influencer? And he was just amazed. He always is very generous with his accolades of what I'm able to accomplish. I guess I have a sense of fearlessness and a sense of risk taking. And I think that's really valuable in kind of jumping in, but making sure that it's a calculated risk. So, you're not tarnishing who you are, and people, aren't thinking negatively towards you or your brand. So I'm really always very cognitively aware of what I'm putting out there and making sure that it's on a professional basis and that it's well received.
Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to read off some of the accolades that you shared with me, because I know what it's like to be humble and to not want to boast about yourself. So I'm not going to ask you to boast about yourself. I'm going to boast for you, Tammy, just to share with my listeners some of the recognition that you have achieved. And then where we're going to take it next is the positive impact that it's having on your brand. So here's just a few, because there's so many here that I'm not going to read them all. But, recently you were recognized as 2018 AMA, American Marketing Association Marketer of the Year finalist, 2017 Tampa Bay Business Woman of the Year finalist, Work Comp Central Comp Laud Award finalist, WorkComp Central People's Choice Award finalist, national speaking in 2017, WorkComp Central Annual Education Conference and Gala. So you've done a bunch of speaking. You've been invited into volunteer roles. Most notably, I don't know if it's most notably, one of them that I know something about is University of South Florida here in Tampa, their digital marketing certificate advisory board. You were invited to be on their advisory board. So if you want to just kind of speak to the impact that that's had on your brand, this recognition, and then we'll take it to the impact on your company's brand.
Sure. So on my personal brand, it's really elevated who I am, that I'm seen as a leader within my industry, specifically in what I'm doing in marketing and business development. I've had people approach me of, how they can get started, what can they do next. So now I've become more of a resource for other individuals. I really believe in knowledge sharing. So I think that's important because it helps elevate the entire industry and not just personally for yourself. And when you were talking about bragging about yourself, that's one of the barriers that I had to overcome. I'm not necessarily bragging about myself, but just getting the word out there about industry events, about what's going on, because I saw other influencers doing this and they seemed comfortable with that. So that seemed to be a challenge for me, and I just had to get over that barrier to move forward.
Okay, that makes sense. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Okay, before we talk about the impact that it's had on the brand, I want to take a brief pause here for a message from our sponsor, SAP. SAP has trained 12,000 sales reps across the globe in social selling strategies. SAP sales reps are skilled at identifying buying signals in social media, engaging prospects in sales conversations, differentiating themselves from competition, and leveraging a technology-driven sales process. The result is sales reps at SAP who use social selling practices have more than 5 times bigger deals on average than those who don't. To learn how SAP has implemented and maintains their global social selling program and what's next on this, get the case study in Social Business Journal Volume 11. It's available for download without a form to fill out at vengreso.com/SAP. That's Savvy Social Selling the SAP way, available for download ungated at vengreso.com/SAP. So Tammy, let's now talk about the impact that your personal brand, what you've been able to achieve in your personal brand, and how that has had a positive impact on the business of the company that you work for, NeuroInternational.
Sure. So now that's translated to where people see me as the face of the organization. It's, again, given us a lot of credibility and integrity within the organization. It's opened a lot of doors for us that I don't think that we otherwise would have had the chance of opening, or they might have opened slower and maybe down the road. So it's really helped accelerate our growth, especially like on a national platform. It was really a Florida-based organization. So now we're seen on a national platform with other providers that are leaders on a national basis within our industry. So I really feel really proud of that positioning. So it hasn't been an overnight success, but I've still plugged away and there's value there, and people have recognized that, and they associate us with these other top providers in the industry. And that's where we positioned ourselves of wanting to be thought leaders within the industry, of being innovators within the industry, and adding transparency and integrity within the organization and within the industry. Because as you know, within any industry, there's bad actors. And so we want to rise to where people trust and value our opinion.
Right. Now, you said something that I want to come back to, and that's that you are now seen as the face of the organization. And that's huge. And I'm going to ask you to elaborate on that. And here's the key point, because remember us discussing this, preparing for the podcast. There are many people at your company who are clinical. They're qualified at the service delivery level. And your role is business development and marketing, yet you are the face of the organization. And your leadership, you said, embraces that. So how significant is that, the fact that you're not a clinical person by training and background, but you're the face of the brand?
Sure. So What's nice about our organization is that we really value the clinical piece. So our clinicians and our physicians are really providing that treatment and care to our client base, to our patients who really need those services. So I'm the one that's delivering the messaging. So once I'm able to do that, and then when we have opportunities to have our clinicians out in the field and out meeting with key stakeholders, then that's when we're able to coordinate both the business development side as well as like the clinical piece, that it merges together and people respond really well to it. Because most providers, especially when you're getting to that higher executive level decision making, they really don't want to be sold to. They really don't want that marketing person there. And that's like where I can make, those introductions to the clinicians, where the clinicians are talking peer to peer, or even our executive level, our CEOs and our president, that they're talking with their peers, because it really adds value there. And there's deeper conversations being made. So I'm more of kind of a conduit of connecting people together for those networking opportunities and building value and relationships there.
But you become recognized. In fact, you mentioned that NeuroInternational is recognized as a center of excellence. Is that correct?
Right. We're trying to get there as the post-acute. So there's U.S. World and News Report puts out a report every year of the top 20 acute care rehabilitation hospitals across the United States. So because of within the brain injury rehab industry space, it's really small, and we're still coming together as a united voice. And so that's what the top providers within the industry, what we're trying to accomplish, is to have those set pillars of excellence in place, that we can do those measurements and provide measurements and show outcomes that are positive, that are going to be reinforced as showing that we are a leader in our space.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I also want to spend a few minutes discussing the fact that you are a woman in this role as opposed to a man in this role, and what impact has that had on either your personal brand or the elevation of the brand and your relationship with people and, some of the recognition that you've received, again, in your own personal brand?
I haven't really seen where gender has been an issue for me. I think sometimes maybe it opens doors, sometimes maybe it's hindrance, but I've always been a really strong, determined individual. So I've never seen that as a hindrance. And
let me clarify, because I'm sure that I'm asking the way I intend to ask it.
Okay.
What I'm really getting at, Tammy, is that you've become a role model for other women in the industry, not just the workers' compensation industry, in marketing and that sort of thing. And I mentioned earlier that you were invited to be on the advisory board at the USF Digital Marketing Certificate Program. So what impact has your ability to be a role model for other women, what impact is that having on either your career or your brand?
I think there's an impact on both. They see me as a strong female leadership, and then also it builds the brand, being that face of the organization, and that it's opened doors for me. USF Digital Marketing, they came to me, a lot of these opportunities, I didn't even know that they existed, and, that people were inviting me to be on advisory boards and even committees where I didn't know that those opportunities existed. So I think just the visibility of the social media and engagement and networking, all of that's kind of played in together, that recognition has moved forward.
Okay, fantastic. And the last point I want to cover before I get to my summary is, you mentioned earlier that your company is a Florida-based company. Of course, I didn't mention it at the beginning of our conversation, but we know each other here locally in the Tampa Bay business community, and we have known each other for a few years. And so NeuroInternational is a local company, a Florida company, but it's growing outside of Florida. Is that right?
Right. So we're really excited about our growth. We've been growing since pretty much the inception of the organization in 2009 of 25 to 30+% year over year. And it's been organic growth. And so we're really excited that we feel like we're ready to take that next level of looking at other opportunities outside the state of Florida.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Tammy, we are at the point in the podcast where I am going to summarize what we've discussed, and then I'm going to ask you to either elaborate on a point or maybe clarify something. If I jog your memory on a point that you want to make, by all means, make it, and then we'll bring our podcast conversation to a wrap. We began with an introduction to your company, NeuroInternational. It's a post-acute provider for brain or spinal injury patients. You are the Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at NeuroInternational. And you mentioned that you're a very competitive person and you noticed that when the company that you work for didn't really embrace a digital strategy, that by attending events and networking, your extensive networking, you recognized that you, through your own digital strategy, could build your brand, and that could have a positive impact on the NeuroInternational brand. So you began to do that through your engagement in social media, but you did it with a business purpose, and that's very impressive. You sought out decision makers in the workers' compensation space. You really made sure you understand what their business issues are, their pain points, learn how they've become successful, and really focus on building your brand and connecting it to NeuroInternational so that the company can be seen as a leader in the industry. And you did that by being professional and consistent and of integrity and just doing it very, very effectively. You shared your aha moment where you were at a national event that was attended by 8,000 people. You were an exhibitor. You were looking around, networking, and you noticed that there was a monitor tracking influencers through their tweets. So you engaged and you were recognized as a top 20 influencer at that event. And of course, the folks back at the office gave you a big high five for that. My words, not your words, and really recognized you for that. And of course, well recognized. And that led to more opportunities. Before you knew it, you were speaking at national conferences, invited to participate on committees. We mentioned that you were invited to be on the advisory board at the University of South Florida digital marketing certification program. And you've really become recognized as a resource in your industry, and you're helping to elevate the industry. I think that's a key point that I want to make sure doesn't get lost in this conversation, that this conversation isn't just about Tammy Boyd building her personal brand, Tammy. It's about how you also are helping to elevate the industry that you're in. I think that alone deserves a tremendous amount of kudos and recognition. So I want to make sure that that point really gets emphasized. And you've really become the face of your company, NeuroInternational. It's really opened a lot of doors for the company. The company's now seen on a national platform as opposed to just locally in Florida, recognized as an innovator in the industry and also a company of high integrity. And even though the clinicians are the ones that are delivering the patient care, you, in fact, are delivering the message. And again, you're the face of the brand. You really help to elevate the brand. And of course, we also discussed that you are a role model for other women because what you're doing is very effective, very successful. Other women can learn from you. And of course, you're aware of that role model leadership position and you wear it well and certainly is deserving. You also mentioned that the company is growing organically, 25% year over year. And as we mentioned earlier, expanding outside of Florida. So great story. I'm so glad you came on the podcast to share it. Is there anything, Tammy, that you'd like to add to my summary?
Wow, you did it so well. I don't know that I could add anything else.
Okay. All right. Well, where would you like to send my listener to connect with you online and network with you and get to know more about what you're up to and also your company, NeuroInternational?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Tammy Boyd. Just do a search and I should pop up. If not, you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is TammyAmi813, which is TAMIAMI 813. And I'm on other platforms, but those are the ones that I feel like are most business oriented, that I'm trying to reach my targeted audience. And then for NeuroInternational, it's just how it sounds. It's NEURO international.com. You want more information specifically on rehabilitation, neuro rehab, complex medical, and long-term supported living. That's where you can go for more information about the organization. So again, Bernie, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Oh, absolutely, Tammy. Well, my listener knows that everything you just shared will be linked up in our show notes page at Vengreso.com in the podcast section. Just find episode 208. So Tammy, thank you so much for joining me here today on this episode, for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Tammy Boyd, Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at NeuroInternational. This has been episode 208, titled Building a Personal Brand to Elevate a Corporate Brand. Now, my one big takeaway from my conversation with Tammy is how tenacious she is. I mean, look, rather than using the excuse that her management team doesn't embrace digital and just caving to that mindset, instead, Tammy set out to build her own personal brand, and she didn't just do it for self-serving reasons. Now, of course, her brand has been good for her. You heard several examples of awards and accolades that she's received, but the impact that her brand is having on her employer, NeuroInternational, is very real. Simply stated, Tammy's personal brand is elevating her company's brand. And that is just awesome. So, what's your takeaway from my conversation with Tammy Boyd? Just visit the podcast section at Vengreso.com, find episode 208, where I'll have links to everything that we discussed. And hey, I want to remind you that the Social Business Engine podcast is available at really any podcast player that you can practically think of. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, even YouTube. And if there's others out there, then let me know so we can get on that one as well. So be sure to subscribe from your favorite podcast player so that you don't miss an episode that we publish each and every Wednesday. Hey, this episode is sponsored by SAP. Social Business Journal, Volume 11, is a case study in savvy social selling the SAP way. This case study is available for download without a form to fill out. Just click on the big button to open up the PDF in your browser, and that big button is available at Vengreso.com/SAP. And that is linked up in our show notes page at Vengreso.com/podcasts. While you are there at our website, that is, be sure to subscribe to get the Social Business Engine podcast delivered to your inbox each and every week on Wednesdays. And if you're in sales, be sure to subscribe to my partner's podcast, Selling with Social, hosted by Vengreso's CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Well, that is a wrap for episode 208. I want to thank my guest once again, Tammy Boyd, Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at NeuroInternational. This is Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso, signing off for now and wishing you continued success on your social business journey.
Thank you for listening to the Social Business Engine podcast. Be sure to tune in again next week to reconnect with Bernie Borges for more insights, inspiration, and practical advice on social business. Visit socialbusinessengine.com to catch even more content on social strategy that will rock your business and your career.